I'm a very critical consumer of literature. I'm much more critical of books than I am of movies, but that's because with books you have to put a lot of time and effort into reading them, and it's not really, on my part, it's very unlikely that I'm actually going to enjoy it. While a film, it can be bad, but at least it's not going to be longer than 5 hours, unlike with books, which can take weeks or months or years in the case of something like Finnegan's Wake. So, this as a guide for analyzing literature, it does not come from someone who reads or watches literature with the expectation of enjoying it. This is someone from a more scholarly, more analytical perspective of consuming literature, which is you're consuming it to learn something, not really to enjoy it. And so if you want a guide to analyze something with enjoyment, try actually consuming it once beforehand for the enjoyment, just for the vibes, and then read it the second time or consume it the second time for the analyzing. So I have a few things that I'd have to say. For example, these are the tools that I use when analyzing. I have a pencil, hopefully, because I prefer that over a pen so that it's not so permanent, because sometimes my handwriting sucks, and also because you can erase stuff from pencil. I use a non-permanent markation device. So this is to say sticky notes and those little things for those little sticky tabs with the colors. Yeah. I don't recommend highlighters, but if you want to do that, you can. And Storybook, it's your choice. It's a small to medium notepad. So as you don't write too many notes, it's unless you want it to be comprehensive. I usually want to keep my note taking light, such as annotating questions on the side and just writing things down that I noted, and a few other things. A few tools that I think are good if you want to do the pre-reading thing, such as preparation, reviewing related literature. I use either the Oxford Handbook of whatever topic that is, or the Stanford Encyclopedia of whatever topic that is. I also just generally look it up with making sure that I check primary sources, secondary sources, and tertiary sources. But if I had to choose between those three, I'd recommend to disregard the tertiary source, or at least to focus much more on the secondary source than the primary source. Because the primary source, you yourself, you are not the best analytically yet, and so you may not catch things that other people have caught. And some of the things that you can catch have already been caught. And though, if you are going to read about, say, opinion pieces or thought pieces about the thing, I'd recommend not to read that before the consumption of the primary literature, because sometimes we end up regurgitating other people's opinions rather than forming our own. So if you have to find the dialogues regarding the work, I'd recommend reading it after or during rather than before, so that when you do form these opinions and these analyses, they come from you. Now, if there's an introduction to the text, I do recommend reading it. Unless you want to go blind, then you can do that. But I think you should read the introduction in the first read, or when you're done reading the thing entirely. When you finish the work, then read the introduction. If you want to read the introduction beforehand, I also recommend reading it. I know some people refuse to read introductions because, why would I want to read about this? I want to read from this person, not that. I don't want to hear about these thoughts about this. I want to read this itself. Well, introductions are very helpful, so they also help explain things that are going to be confusing, because a lot of texts will be confusing. So it's ultimately your choice if you want to read the introduction. I do recommend it, especially for philosophy books. Now, I think that if you are going to read or watch something, I'd recommend that you stay engaged to it if you're reading or consuming it with the purpose of analyzing it. If you want to do it just for enjoyment, just for entertainment, I guess you can multitask, but then I suppose you're not really consuming the literature in a way that would be good for analyzing. So I'd recommend keeping your phone away, making sure that you are not tired, making sure that you are not multitasking, or if you're going to multitask, make sure that it's not multitasking to the point that you're actually just consuming it like a podcast. Like it's just happening in the background and you're sometimes noticing it. I think you should stay very focused on what you're doing. And a few tips that I do to stay focused is I actually exercise while consuming these things. I have like a bike thing, and I just bike there while reading or bike there while listening to something, so that to make sure that I am focused at the same time as consuming it. I think annotation is also important. I don't think you should annotate with a pen the first time around, so that you can see your thoughts at the moment of consuming the thing. I would also mark places where I would have questions. I have color tabs. I only sometimes use them because honestly, a little sick voice in my head would sometimes go, "Oh, you just want to look cool." Well, yeah, of course I want to look cool. So I actually changed my color tabs to be a system, so that some colors would mark, say, "Oh, this is interesting. Oh, this is a question. Oh, this is just weird. Oh, stuff like that." So that I have to annotate less, but sometimes I still annotate, and as much as possible, I annotate with a pencil rather than a pen. And if I have to annotate with a pen, I make sure that I write it near the spine area, near the place where it kind of, spreads. I think if you are trying to consume something for enjoyment, I think you should be aware of what content style and genres work best for you, what appeals you the most. But even if you're aware of that, I still think that you should try exploring stuff that you know that you don't know you will like, or things you know you probably won't like, because sometimes the reading or watching of a thing is not designed for the enjoyment of its consumption. Sometimes things are like a textbook. You're supposed to learn from it, you're not really meant to enjoy it. And some things are not really meant to be enjoyed. But if you want to enjoy it, then be instead of aware of what content style or genres work best for you, so that you know when you're gonna get a fun time out of it, hopefully. I think that you should read slowly if you can, if you're reading something, and definitely be willing to reread it, because you're never gonna understand something at the first consumption of it. Try to make sense of it before. And so that's like just me when I'm trying to guess an ending, to guess what's gonna happen next. To me, I find it very interesting, and also because it's very easy to recognize patterns when it comes to film and books. It's annoying though if they follow it too much, but to some, I guess it would be much more interesting if they follow these patterns. I think that after a chapter, every few chapters, you should probably write questions for about the chapter or little summaries in your head. If you are like me, you probably would record what you think about something, which is what I do, so that I can hear my thoughts at the moment. I think after your first consumption, you should actually let yourself sleep, or let yourself have a couple days or a couple hours to just let it sit and simmer, so that you can truly parse through your thoughts that are not just immediate emotion. Because immediacy is not the same as lingering. Because sometimes when you consume something, it really affects you in the moment, and then the next day you just forget. That's not really something I think is worth analyzing. I think something should stick with you. And so I really recommend letting it stick with you by not writing your opinions immediately after, or if you have to, be able to write an opinion afterwards that does not really adhere to your original opinion. I think you should reread and let there be spaces of time between each consumption. I think you should be able to explain to yourself all of these things, like without reading it. That's just me. This is especially for, say, if you're trying to consume something for educational purposes. You should be able to focus less on memorization and much more on understanding. So that's just for analysis. I personally, I listen to recordings of my own thoughts of it, just to see how my thoughts during that time still, go to my thoughts today. That's just generally how I analyze a text, how I analyze a movie. With movies, still, I don't jot notes as often, but I still do. I think this is a very good practice, especially if you're trying to practice your critical reading and your literacy skills. Overall, that's just my guide. You can have any other guide of your own. You can just do whatever you want. Read for enjoyment, read for analysis. It's up to you really at the end.